Hi guys, as you can see from the provocative title, I decided to do a video about one of the most asked questions related to my Solar BMS. But I won't stop at MPPT, and I will include some other obsolete technologies related to the massive drop in the price of PV panels over the last few years. So let me start with MPPT. MPPT are initials from the maximum power point tracking, and is exactly what the name implies, a tracker tracking the maximum operating power point of photovoltaic arrays. So to do that, it needs two components. One is a hardware component that needs to have at least a switching mode DC-DC converter and usually a microcontroller. And the second part is the maximum power point tracking algorithm that's just a piece of software inside the microcontroller. If you use a microcontroller, it can be done with analog parts also. The SBMS, the Solar BMS, of course, has a microcontroller, and it will be easy to implement the MPPT algorithm, but the most expensive part by far is the switching mode DC-DC converter. Here is a 2000 watt DC-DC converter in the popular Outback FlexMax 80 MPPT charge controller. 90% of what you see here is related to the switch mode DC-DC converter. You can notice the two large inductors and the large electrolytic capacitors, and also the large number of high voltage MOSFET, to name just a few of the heavy and expensive parts used in the DC-DC converter. Most of the cost of this MPPT charger is in the DC-DC converter, probably well over 80%, and they are selling this at least in the thousands or tens of thousands of units per year. I'm not sure, but they definitely sell quite a lot of them to keep the price down. That's not possible with my 100 units of Solar BMS or so. But another problem is that this DC-DC converter will need a few replacements over the life of the PV panels. At least 3, if not more. Because solar PV panels can last for 25-30 years at least. So this DC-DC converter will not last even close to that. The main reason are the electrolytic capacitors used that have a limited lifetime, especially at elevated temperature. They will be working at anyway in this DC-DC converter. Temperature from the surrounding FETs and inductors, and also their own self-generated heat from the current ripple that they need to filter. Here, in this case, they use some Panasonic capacitors rated at 3000 hours of operation at a rated temperature of 105 degrees Celsius in this case. Even if the temperature will be lower than this maximum temperature, the capacitor will not last much longer. Those 3000 hours are less than 1 hour per day if you want this to last for 10 years. But solar charge controllers will work much longer than that every day. So depending on their thermal design and use scenario, this may last close to or much less than 10 years. So anyway, let's take a look at the performance gain of an MPPT in order to be able to calculate the cost amortization of the MPPT. So my first point will be about MPPT not being cost effective or competitive with solar PV prices, currently at around 80 cents per watt. So there will also be a second point, but let's look at this first one. I used a 60 cell 255 watt PV panel, and a 305 watt 72 cell PV panel in this comparison of a Solar BMS and a charge controller with MPPT capabilities. It's just a generic solar charge controller. It doesn't matter. It's just important that it has MPPT capabilities. As you know, 60 cells are the most common and easy to find, also inexpensive solar panels. Inexpensive as in dollar per watt, but they will not work with an MPPT and a 24 volt battery, because the difference between the battery voltage and the panel maximum power point voltage is not enough for the DC-DC converter to work. But I consider it will work just to see the gain if that was the case. But you'll see it's not the case. It probably works at low temperatures and even has a bit of gain, as you can see, but it is insignificant, especially as an annual average. There are 4 cell temperatures at which these calculations are made. Cell temperature are not the same with ambient temperature. The cell can be 20 to 30 degrees Celsius above ambient. So you can now see why I recommend 60 cells PV panels with a 24 volt battery on my Solar BMS. That has to do with the fact that these panels will work at or very close to the maximum power point, except for the times where PV cells are really hot. In that case, they will output less power than the maximum power point, but not far. And you'll see at the next point why this is not important anyway. But let's look at the 72 cell PV panel that will work great with a MPPT controller, and see what the gains are compared to a non-MPPT charger like the Solar BMS. You notice the average gain over a year, it's around 15%. So this means that, for example, the FlexMax 80 with full configurations can take 6 of these panels. 7 will be too many. So with 6 you have a 1830 watts total array. So that will produce an average 15% more energy, but it's the same or a bit worse as getting another 300 watt solar panel for 80 cents a watt. That's just $240. So it's less than the initial investment in the MPPT. So you can use 7 of these panels without MPPT, and you'll get the same amount of extra energy without the extra with less investment at getting an MPPT, and will last for 25-30 years, while the MPPT will probably need to be replaced at least 3 times over this same period. I also need to add that Solar BMS with 7 of these smaller 255 watt panels that will cost the same as the 6 larger panels will have the same gain as the FlexMax with those 6 panels, and so MPPT it's really not cost effective at all in this case with a 24 volt battery, because you don't need to use the larger panels. You can use the 60 cell panels and no non-MPPT controller, and you will get all those gain for the exactly same investment. So it doesn't make sense. Okay, but maybe some do not care about money and just want to use the most of what is available, even if it's not cost effective to do so. This is where the second argument against MPPT comes in. We are talking here about off-grid energy storage, and battery is not an infinite storage medium. So most of the time you have at least 20 and as much as 60 to 70% unused energy. Meaning that in off-grid, once your battery is full and your load is smaller than what the PV array can produce, that counts as unused energy. And it's always the case in off-grid, even if maybe some do not realize this. In a sunny day, I usually have my batteries fully charged by around 12:30 in the afternoon, sometimes even sooner. So all will an MPPT do in this case will be having my batteries charged 10 or 20 minutes sooner, but that's absolutely useless since all the rest of the energy available after that will remain mostly unused. So it makes no sense to have an MPPT in off-grid. Grid tie is a completely different situation for at least two reasons. First, grid can take all the energy you can produce, at least at the moment when there are not that many grid tie solar connected arrays. I don't know what will happen in the future. And second, the DC-DC converter, the expensive part it's already there in the grid tie inverter. So since you already have all the hardware components there and you pay for them, and you can also push as much energy as you want into the grid, then in that case that 50% extra energy makes sense. But for off-grid, MPPT it's completely useless because of these 2 points. It's not cost effective and it's not useful in an off-grid situation. That extra energy it's usually wasted, so it's even worse than not being cost effective. I think these two arguments are more than sufficient for my MPPT obsolescence claim. There are others that talk about savings on thinner cables when you use multiple panels in series for higher PV voltage, but that argument is not a valid one, since the extra price of the cable will be at most $100 or $150 for a large array at any reasonable distances. And the DC-DC converter will have lower efficiency with higher PV voltage compared to battery voltage. See here the graph from the Flex Max. Sorry for the low resolution. This was the only one that I found. And here is another one from the 3-star, another popular MPPT charger. Both are for 12 volt batteries and different PV voltage, but you see the same. You will see the same variation with 24 volt battery. That drop in efficiency alone will negate the savings on cables, but you still pay the premium for the MPPT. There is also the problem of electrical noise and interference from the DC-DC converter used in MPPT. The PVM also has a similar problem, but Solar BMS does not use any of this. There is absolutely no electrical noise since there is no fast high current switching at any point during charging. That is not needed with lithium iron phosphate, since lithium iron phosphate does not require constant voltage charging. That will reduce the life of the battery if used, and at no additional gains. I think I said enough about MPPT, so let me mention a few other technologies that become obsolete with a drastic or dramatic drop in price of the PV panels. First, a similar one is the solar tracker. You know, that mechanical tracker that follows the sun path. For the same reason as MPPT, cost amortization versus fixed panel array, and the fact that all the extra energy in the summer is not needed anyway. Those mechanical solar trackers usually have gains in the summer when the sun, when there are much more hours of sun and the sun has a much longer path on the skies than in the winter. In the winter you don't get almost no gain from that, but in the summer you can get quite a lot of gain, but that's it will not, those gain even in grid tie situation will not be able to amortize the cost of the investment in the mechanical tracking system. The mechanical part is the expensive one, the electronic one that senses where the sun is, and that costs nothing, but the mechanical support needs to be rigid and strong to resist at high winds, otherwise you will lose your panels, and I mean that's even worse. So it needs to be strong, and because it needs to rotate, it will be much more expensive than a fixed one. Another one, it's solar thermal. You know, those vacuum tubes to heat water or to heat your house. I recently made a calculation and the cost is the same per watt. They also maybe last as much as the PV panels if they are good quality, but you need thermal insulated pipes instead of copper conductors to transport the energy, and you need expensive pumps and probably some heat exchangers. One advantage though of these vacuum tubes is that since they are more efficient than PV panels, they will use less space, maybe 2.5 times less space. And if you have a limited space, maybe in some cases they can be a good solution. But disadvantages are multiple. One is that you will have a lot of extra energy in the summer, so you will need to cover the panels, or else you will need to dump all that extra heat from vacuum tubes. The PV panels don't care if they are left disconnected, so it's not the case there. You don't need to cover the PV panels. And second, since it's heat and not electricity, you cannot find much less. You will find much less uses for the extra energy. So with electricity, you can use it in many other applications. The extra energy, I mean, in the summer. You can find some uses for electricity, but it's very hard to find some uses for heat, especially in the summer. So my choice is clear. I will be using solar PV to heat my house as soon as I can afford to get them. It's like paying for 25 or 30 years of heating in advance, but it's still worth it because it's much cheaper than any other heating source. In my case, I made calculations with almost everything, including natural gas or wood or almost anything. It's more expensive than PV panels, even if I don't use any of the extra energy in the summer. But I will need to find some use for that extra energy, and then it will be even better. Another obsolete technology that I can think of is large windows for direct solar gain. So some people design their houses with very large windows so that they can heat the thermal mass inside the house. But in cold climates like the one I live in, with inexpensive two-pane windows, you will be losing more than you gain, since it's cold and the day is short in the winter, and the windows have something like R3 or R3.5, where the walls are 10 times more, R30 or R35. So there is less loss on the wall compared with a window. While with a solar PV you only have a gain. The energy does not escape back at night, as it is the case with windows. There may be some more obsolete technologies, but none that come to mind right now. So if you know some, please let us know in the comments. And if you disagree with my assessment, please leave a comment. I will try to give you more details about. Thanks for watching, and see you next time. Well, not see you, but you know what I mean. Bye.